Welcome to Attican Plays Railway Empire. All right, welcome to another Railway Empire video. This is a continuation of our fundamentals series, and we're going to look at a rapid expansion strategy. I'm going to show you a new twist on it that I think improves it significantly, both in terms of how it works, how fast you can go, and what it does to your competition. And we're going to look at the various phases. It's a very kind of methodical way of doing things that works beautifully. We're doing it in free mode. We're going to have limited money, 600K. We are going to have competitors because I want to show how this interacts with the competition. And we're going to use reduced rates, so everything, the hard as we can make it pretty much. We're going to use the trickster, and really for this, I think the trickster and the general would be the two to think about, and you'll see why as we go along here. But the first thing you want to do in any map, any scenario, you want to check out things and see what you got. So I'm looking around. I'm in Kansas City with a meat industry. So obviously what we really want to get, of course, is beer. So we're looking at where's the beer on the map, where's the meat, and where are we going to run our line. So the obvious place is up to Des Moines for the beer. However, we can also think about it that right above us in Rochester is where one of our competitors will be. They start in this map in Rochester, Toledo, I think it is, and Nashville, I believe. So, but the close one to us is right up there, right above us in Rochester. So what we're going to do is start out. If you notice, I laid down a small train station. That's a key thing here. I'm going to put down a small train station in Des Moines, run a line to it, and now that I have it connected, I start to build my track. And then I realize, you know what? That guy's right up above me, so I want to bump him out right away. I do not want him in Des Moines. So I'm going to build a second small train station. And it's important that you build them like that with the backs facing each other so that they can expand out away from each other in either direction. If you're not doing that, make sure that's how you build your two train stations in a city so that you have room to expand in both directions. So now that we've got that kind of saved that spot with that other train station, we're going to set up our first line. So remember, one of our principles is if cities are worth connecting, they're worth double tracking, they're worth running trains and making money. So that we're going to follow that principle and set up a double track line here. And we're going to run it between the meat industry in Kansas City and the beer industry in Des Moines. And we're going to set up very specifically how we do these signals. If you notice, I'm not using that control functionality to put signals all over the place. I want my trains spread out. So kind of a typical way I like to do it is supply tower right in the middle, and then divide that from the middle to each of the cities, divide that in half with a set of signals, and then that's all you need. Then that way your trains will stay spread out a little bit, and they won't be flying into the station one right after the other and not getting enough passengers to make it worthwhile. We're going to run automatic lines, and you'll see what we do later, but right now we're going to run automatic lines, and we're going to run some trains. We're going to run 6 trains here. It's a good line. It's over the 140 mark. The 140 is kind of 4 trains, plus it's beer and meat. Now, if that had been meat to meat or beer to beer, we probably would only run 4 trains there because you're not going to get that freight. So we use up our money already. We're already borrowing. Remember, we only started with $600,000. So funds, and try to make this as tough and as realistic as possible. Now, we've got the beer in Des Moines, and we've got right up here, there's meat in Rochester. And I'm looking to see how can I put my station to mess him up as much as possible. Basically, I'm cutting off his back ability to lay track back in the other direction. And I'm going to take stake my claim to Rochester as well, because that's his city. He's going to be growing it. Now notice this line runs into that second small station that we set up in Des Moines. So now we can still have a dedicated line between Des Moines and Rochester, and it won't compete with our Kansas City to Des Moines line for platform space. So now we've got a second connection, so we'll double track it, and we will run our trains between Rochester and Des Moines. And again, this is going to be a beer to meat line, so it's going to be a good one. It's going to make money. It's going to allow that industry in Des Moines, the beer, to really expand, because now it's going to be able to ship off into two different directions right away. So, and we're not going to mess with buying the beer. And by the way, an option here, of course, would be to try to buy that beer industry. But now remember, we've got three competitors. One of them's going to they're going to make it just too expensive at the beginning. And besides that, this is all about rapid expansion. So we want to save our money for expanding. So we're going to run line. And you'll notice I did the same kind of setup with the signal and towers. I also like to start the trains from each direction, so that you're immediately grabbing beer, you're immediately grabbing meat and passengers, whatever. And we're going to run some trains here too. This is going to be a good line, but it's a little shorter, so we're going to go run 4. Now, we've got meat here. We want to keep going. The whole idea of this is to keep going. So again, we're going to put down a small station. And this time, we're going to turn it and make sure I'm really looking here. I want to see, looking forward to what would I do going down the road. So I'm going to turn it that way, but I'm going to make sure it's far enough over to the west that I can still run lines through there without competing with that body of water there. So now we're going to run down here to Rochester and set up a line between Rochester, which has meat, and Rochester, which has meat, and Des Moines, which has beer. And you'll have to forgive me, but I'm still struggling with my voice a bit. This flu thing, the flu part's gone, but the cough apparently lingers. And I've talked about this with other people, and that's the nature of this flu. You keep the cough for a long time. Anyway, enough about my poor, sad health. So we've connected Kansas City to Des Moines, beer to meat. We've connected Des Moines to Rochester, beer to meat. We are now waiting on the money to connect Rochester to Duluth, beer to meat. And so obviously you can see that pattern. The other one you can see is that while we have an economy, we have some income, it's slow right now, and that's going to be true no matter what approach you take. At the very beginning, it's slow, and everything it goes in a cycle and just kind of ramps up and spirals upward so that you get more and more money as you go along. And see, our train, we're early. We're in our second month. So we've already connected 2 cities and about to connect a third one. So our trains haven't even run a full cycle yet to give us any data on how they're doing money-wise. So we're moving very quickly here. Now, back to that whole idea of the small stations. Putting in 2 small stations, like Des Moines, that was obvious to cut out the competition. But it also... 2 small stations cost you 80 grand, so that gives you the ability to go in either direction. One regular station costs 100 grand, so that's more money just to get you the 2 tracks. And by having the 2 small stations, I now have the ability to expand them. As long as I put them kind of back to back, as I call it, so they can expand out from each other, I have the ability to have up to 8 tracks in the city, which gives me a lot of flexibility for setting up passenger lines to other places, for setting up a pass-through warehouse, and what have you. So it really is a good way to go. All right, so we're just waiting on getting that money going. So now we finally had enough money to build the first line up there to Duluth. And I did make a mistake there. I should have paid more attention to that bridge. I paid too much money for that line that was just built, because the bridge is just too big and too fancy. I should have paid a little more attention. It would have been better had I paid a little more attention, gotten a little cheaper first line, because you can see the second one's going to come in at 128, I guess, and that's way less than the first one. And that's, of course, we've already built the bridge, and we're just adding on to it now, so it's going to be cheaper. But you can see it's significantly cheaper because that bridge was very expensive, unnecessarily so. Anyway, now as soon as we have the money, we will get that one going, and we'll keep going with this idea of our 2 small stations and expanding. Now, why would you use a rapid expansion strategy? One would be, obviously, if you have objectives. And you notice we haven't even looked at our objectives. We're not going to, because I don't want, it really doesn't matter to me at this point what the objectives are. I'm trying to kind of give you the idea of a generic approach. And then you can take this and modify it for the specific requirements of the scenario or mission that you're trying to do. But why would you use a rapid expansion? Where would it be a really good fit? Well, one would be obvious. Connect X cities by a certain date. Obvious, right? Secondly, just in general, it gives you a good footprint for your business. It gives you, if you can expand quickly and get 4 or 5 cities connected in a hurry and have profitable lines running between them. There you can see our Des Moines Rochester making good money. If you can have profitable lines running between 4 or 5 cities fairly quickly, then you've built kind of a foundation that you can then build your economy on. So that's another one. Another one would be if you had a scenario or a free mode task list or something where you have to do a lot of passengers or a lot of mail. Obviously, having an expansive network that had a lot of cities in it would be the best way to go about that. And then you'd want to grow them so that the passengers or mail would increase, but you would want to have a lot of cities in your network. And so, again, so you're building this footprint. And then on top of that, you're also cutting out the competition because particularly with this 2 small station approach in each of these cities, now I'm eliminating my competitor from coming in because each city can have a maximum of 2 train stations. So I'm basically cutting off my competitor. And in fact, I would say that in this particular case, that orange guy, I'm not sure who that is, but whichever competitor that is, he's probably going to be weak, conceivably the whole game, because he's now, his capital is shared with me. So any growth he does in I'll call it capital, his headquarters city, Rochester, he's going to grow that city. Well, I'm going to participate in that growth because I'm taking meat and passengers and mail from Rochester up to Duluth and down to Des Moines. So his growth is helping me, but I'm stunting his growth because his next obvious city to go to from Rochester would be Des Moines, which he can't go to now because I have 2 functioning train stations there, and he's cut out. So now we're building out. So basically, what I'm trying to say is that the rapid expansion, not only does it build you a nice big footprint for your economy, but it also is a great way to go target your competition, cut them off at the pass, so to speak, and limit their ability to grow. So you can stifle their growth a little bit, which does a couple of things. It makes them more purchasable, so to speak, later. And it also gets them out of your way so you don't have to build these weird, flying bridge kind of things trying to get over their track to do what you need to get done. So we're still in an expansion mode, and we want to do one more. We want to get out there. We've got beer in Duluth. We've got meat in Fargo, so we want to get that line going as well. So again, we'll start with a small train station. And we'll run it across to Duluth. And when we get over here to Duluth, we're going to put down instead of expanding that station, we're going to put down a second small station. It's cheaper, and it makes sure that our good buddy from Rochester doesn't come up there and try to steal business from us in Duluth. So now we've cut Rochester off, the Rochester company off in Rochester, so to speak. We've come in behind him. Now we're going to make sure he doesn't go up to the north, because now we're going to have 2 stations in Duluth, and eventually we'll cut him off in our own headquarters as well, of course. But now we're going to connect that, figure out our planning, and then we're going to have to wait a while patiently for this to grow. Again, when you first start, regardless of your strategy, there's sort of that slow period where you have to kind of wait. All right, let's speed things up just a little bit until we have that Fargo to Duluth line completed and we're ready to enter the second phase of our strategy.
I know the problem. Those damned hot water pumps.
Oops, there's one less employee on your books.
Invest a little in your train's reliability.
Will your books still balance after the auction? When your trains break down, it is a reflection of your company's management. I was not familiar with these plans yet. Thank you. Somehow,
All right, so it took us about 14 months, but we've now connected 5 cities with 4 profitable lines running between them. Every one of them is beer meat, and now we're about ready to move into phase 2. Now, phase 2 is going to be, we've got all this beer and meat, and they all need cattle and wheat. So we're going to move into what you might call the cattle wheat phase. We're going to pump cattle into all the meat, directly into each of the meat industries that we can. We're going to do wheat into all the beers that we can. And that's really the next phase. And this one is really going to help us a bunch, because it's going to allow us to continue the growth. Our honeymoon period's over. Another reason for this strategy is you get that honeymoon period where each of the beer and meat industries have stored up goods ready to export. Well, we took advantage of those during our rapid expansion and got those shipped. Well, now, if these cities are not getting a really steady supply of cattle for the meat and wheat for the beer, those freight shipments are going to dry up on us, and we're just going to be running a few passengers. Our lines are not going to be as profitable. So we want to continue the growth, continue to get more profit from the lines. And the first thing we're going to do that is a fairly inexpensive investment, which is run these short lines to put cattle and wheat into each of our appropriate cities. And there are going to be direct connections, because those are the most efficient ways to do it. And what we're going to do here is, we really want, in this case, we are going to expand rather than build another station, because our cattle is over there to the east. And so we wanted to move out to the east, so we expanded one line out to the east. And we're going to run our cattle line now into Kansas City, our headquarters city, and feed that meat industry, which will then have that meat ready to ship off to Des Moines. So we're going to go through this, and we're going to literally connect up just like this. We're going to go to Kansas City, put in meat. We're going to go to Des Moines, put in wheat in a direct line, on and on. And I'm just going to let this run for a minute. And I guess the one thing I do want to say, one thing about when we get to Des Moines and also to Rochester. So I was tempted to fast forward this, but we'll keep it running here. And I'm going to rest my voice for a minute and let you just watch. One quick note here is, you'll notice on the those direct lines for freight, like raw materials into a city, I do the multiple signals, because the freight, it can go in there one right after the other. That's fine. And I'm not trying to keep them spaced out. The whole spacing idea is really for passengers and mail. I want there to be an appropriate amount of time between trains coming into the station, so that there's an accumulation of passengers and mail for the next train. On the freight, that's not an issue. You want to load the freight, at your raw material station as fast as you can, and then move it into the city. Now, here we're running a direct line wheat into Des Moines. And the one comment I wanted to make here is, even if you're going to eventually have a warehouse, and I'll give you a spoiler alert, we are going to eventually have a pass-through warehouse that's going to be part of our whole overall plan here, and it's really an integral part of this strategy. But we still want to have, when you can, that direct line feeding Des Moines with wheat, because that does a couple of things. Let's just say that we had a warehouse between Des Moines and Kansas City, or Des Moines and Rochester, it wouldn't matter. Having that direct connection to get that wheat into Des Moines takes pressure off that warehouse line, so that the wheat doesn't have to get carried so much, and we can get the wheat to the other city, the city that has the meat industry. They need wheat as well. So it takes the pressure off your wheat, and it gives you a steady flow into your beer, so that you have that beer industry being as efficient as possible in shipping it out to wherever it can to sell its beer, and allow you to make the profit on carrying. So you definitely want to do cattle to the meat and wheat directly to the beer, wherever it makes sense and wherever it fits in. Sometimes the geography and what your opponents are up to and your own objectives kind of force you to change one way or another, but just the same, as a principle, you definitely want to do it. And that's the phase we're in right now. Again, is kind of that cattle and wheat phase. Okay, another quick note here about your staffing, just to state the obvious. When you get into that wheat beer, or what I call it, that cattle wheat phase, you definitely want to get your security guards on those short lines, because they're going to give you a 5% bump on your freight prices. You want those on those direct lines that get paid. You don't want them on lines that are running to a warehouse. They don't get paid. You want your security guards on those direct lines, raw materials to a city, or to your lines that are taking goods from the warehouse to the city, because they get paid as well. That's where you want your security guards. And obviously you want your conductors on your lines that are going to carry your mail, because that's what they are good for. And then your engineers and stokers can really go on any long lines, because they help with speed and with reliability of your locomotives. But the key thing is get those security guards on those short lines that are going to run often. Like that cattle line down there in Kansas City is perfect, because it's a short line. It has a lot of demand. It's going to run frequently, and every time it does, that security guard station there is going to give you a 5% bump on your freight prices. So now we're doing the wheat up to Duluth. And if you notice, we skipped the meat in Rochester. One reason was because it was just a clumsy connection, and I'm just looking ahead and thinking that, I'm going to buy this guy out there. And at some point I will buy this guy and get him out of the way. I'll either take over his tracks and use them, or I will liquidate him and take the money, and then I'll build my own stations. But so I'm going to let him take care of the supplies into Rochester for now. And so I skipped Rochester meat, and I'm going up here to do the wheat into Des Moines. And now, obviously enough, we're moving over to do the cattle line into Fargo. And once we finish this, that'll wrap up our second phase of development, the cattle wheat phase. And then we'll move on to the next phase. And notice here that I put in a second station in Fargo, because that other station is oriented to expand to the north. I need room down here to the south, so I put in another small station, which is still cheaper. It's actually cheaper to put that second station in than to expand the first station. Expanding a small to a regular costs you $60. Putting in another small only costs you $40. And just another quick note, you'll notice we have not put in any maintenance anywhere. We're just accepting the fact that once in a while our trains are going to break down. Now, why is that? I've discussed this before in comments with some of you, but you don't put the maintenance in right away because money is too tight and there's too many important things to do right up front. However, we will get to that. Just be patient.
When your trains break down, it is a reflection of your company's management.
Okay, so now we've moved past the cattle wheat phase, and we're actually heading into the pass-through warehouse phase. We're going to now start bumping up our freight. And one of the keys to this is a couple of things on timing. We've got a decent economy now, so we're going to close all our bonds out and then reissue them bigger because we need a lot of money. So we've got over $1 million here, and you're going to need at least that much to really set up one of these pass-through warehouses. That's one of the reasons you don't just jump in typically and do one right off the bat. You wait until you have an established economy through your expansion, and then we go for it. So we're looking, and I mean, there's 3 great places to build one. 4. We could, all 4 of our lines are beer meat. We could build 4 of them if we wanted to. We're picking the spot. We could easily do Rochester, Des Moines would be a great one. But I'm looking right now, I'm looking around to see where's the stuff going to come from. So which side do I want to put my pass-through on? And what by side, I mean, I'm going to put it, I'm not going to take out that track that's running already between the two. I'm going to add a new track that's next to it. So I decided that over there to the west is where my goods can all come from. So I'm going to put my warehouse to the west. I'm going to expand this station so that I now have 2 free platforms. And we'll go down here to Kansas City and do the same thing. And now it's time to put in a new station. So I'm going to put in a train station that has 2 platforms so I can use those 2. And then that'll give us what we need. And then we're going to set up a kind of what I'm now starting to think of as classic pass-through warehouse. And all our goods are going to come from the west, so we're going to use the farthest east 2 platforms. So platforms 3 and 4 basically for our city-to-city lines. And we're going to connect them up like so. And then connect them out the other end and run them up to Des Moines, to the 2 new tracks we just opened up there. And I do highly recommend that when you start into this pass-through warehouse thing, have money, have at least $1 million. Be better if you had even a little bit more, but at least $1 million before you do this. So that's why you want to time it out, and that's why the timing of all this works so beautifully. Rapid expansion to lay your footprint, wheat cattle to get you some good money coming in from freight, and to continue to keep that beer and meat shipping between the cities to keep your city-to-city lines profitable. and then close out your bonds and open bigger bonds so that you have plenty of money to work with. And as I said again, at least $1 million. So now here, I am going to use the control functionality to put in multiple signals, because this is going to end up being a freight line. I want to run as fast as I can. On both ends, we're going to use the double crossover method. We're going to put switches in so that you have the ability to use both platforms on each end. That's extremely important for throughput. If you just let them run point to point, you will get backups, because we're going to run a lot of trains through here. You'll see. We're going to run a lot of trains hauling this freight. And we want to be able to, and it basically, if you use two platforms, it doubles your throughput compared to using one. How's that for brilliant deduction right there? So we're figuring out what all we're going to put in there. It's basically going to be wheat, corn, logs, sugar, I think it's fruit, and veggies are all over there to the west, and we can get them all. I set them on max at start, and you'll see I go back and change that later. There's a good comment that I think it was Anglo-Saxon made about if you don't set everything up to max, particularly the items that are slow users in the city, like fruit, for example, unless you have a distillery going or something, you can cut down on the traffic, because the trains will tend to stop and sit back in their raw material station and kind of rest, if you will, and not be tying up your lines. So now we're figuring out how we want to come in. And what we want to do here is we're setting up a line between the wheat to come in, and we're actually going to then reuse that line 2 more times to get 2 more items in there. And what we want to do to balance this out, to have a good design for our warehouse, is we want to have good throughput of our raw materials. We don't want them lined up and waiting on each other. So when I figured out what side to put this on and where to put it, I was also thinking about how to divide these up so that I could split up the goods and have kind of an equal number of goods coming in from each side. So I wanted to have 3 coming from the north and 3 coming from the south, and they're each going to use a different platform. So all the ones coming from the north are going to use platform 2, and all the goods coming from the south are going to use platform 1. And that way they don't compete with each other and stare off at each other while they're in the warehouse. And so we're just setting up this line so that it can run out and hook into platform 2. There we go. We'll double track it back, because again we're going to, well, 1, we're going to run multiple trains to get that wheat in there because it's a pretty long distance, and 2, we want to reuse that track for a couple of other items, basically fruit and corn, that are going to come from up there in the north. Now here I realize that I can't run my line, even though I think I should be able to. I did a really stupid thing. If you notice, I got both the lines running, both those lines from the wheat are going the same direction, because I just inadvertently set my directional signal up here at the top the wrong way, and eventually I figured it out and turned around. And now, because I use that automatic functionality, I got to go around here and flip all these things around. let's see, here we go. There, I'll finally, there we go. Punch in. Now I got to go correct all my mistakes. You wouldn't really necessarily have to fix all those. You could fix every other one or whatever. It really doesn't matter. But I decided to bite the bullet and fix them all. And so now, because I'm just a little sloppy with my directional to start with, and then use that, and didn't double check myself and make sure they were running in opposite directions, I used that automatic functionality, and it kind of bit me and cost me a lot of work here. But anyway, we get it fixed, and all's well that ends well in this case.
Why are you building a station in the middle of nowhere?
Okay, so now I'm going down to the other end, to the south end, and grabbing logs and bringing them up and setting them up to go into, remember we want to do the other platform, we want to do platform 1 for those. So trying to make sure it doesn't cost me an arm and a leg to get across that river. And we'll run the logs up here, and then we'll have to do something in order to make sure we get that supply tower to work, because we're not really using platform 2 from this direction, but we're going to have to connect both of them up. I'm right now I'm kind of mulling it over, trying to figure out what to do. But what we're going to have to do now, I first also going to stub that one out and then run by it, but that doesn't really work. You know, because it won't grab on correctly. So I said, okay, we're just going to have to run the line through like so, and then have our return line go out from platform 1. Now, platform 1 is our intended target here. And you could do this a different way. You could run from both ends. You could have both platforms available and then selectively say, well, I want this line to run into this platform, this one, or the other one. To me, it seemed like the easiest thing was to divide them into 3 and 3, particularly if they do divide into 3 and 3. Then you can just say, okay, everything from the south goes into 1, everything from the north goes into 2. As you also see, I have to kind of figure that out again. I'm not always the brightest bulb on the tree, so I'll have to figure out eventually how I want to do that in terms of crossover and stuff. But at any rate, we're setting up the logs to come in. And as far as just a comment on when you're setting up these pass-through warehouses or any warehouse that you're going to use to feed raw materials into a city, you want to make sure that you have some raw materials in there before you start worrying about your line. Now, particularly, and the nice thing about this approach, we've still got profitable lines running. And see here, I can't get to it because I haven't got the crossover up at the top. It'll, you know, in a moment I'll figure that out. But in your, we still have the city-to-city line running and making us money. So we don't have to get in any rush to run this line that's going to do our freight line. So here I build the crossover so I can get over to platform 1. And now I can set up the line for my logs and run it into platform 1. And I explicitly tell it to go into platform 1. And now we're set. Now we've got wheat coming down into platform 2 from the north. We've got logs coming up to into platform 1 from the south. Now we're going to add on some more items. We're going to run corn in there and take advantage of that line that's right next to it, and merge the corn line into the wheat line and let them come into the same way into the station, or into the warehouse, excuse me. So we follow our process of doing our crossovers and then doing our second line to merge. Okay, this video is getting pretty long, and right now we're just putting in our raw materials into our warehouse. So let's speed it up for a moment until we get to the point where we are ready to actually build the city-to-city lines that go through the warehouse. And now we're going to start running trains. And what I want to show you here is we've got the double track. So what we want to do is get in the habit of going, I go from the left track in the first one and the left track in the second one. And that's my first train. So I always run sets of 4 here. So there's my first train. Now I want to run my second train. It's going to be the same thing, city, warehouse, city, warehouse. Now I'm going to run from the left again, and then I'm going to run from the right. So now I've got using the right-hand station down in Kansas City. Now my third one is going to be city, warehouse, but we're going to run from the right-hand station in Des Moines and the left-hand station in Kansas City. And you notice these are freight only, and I'll go back and fix the other two. I realize what I'm doing here. I want these to be freight only. Now again, same setup, but now I want to go from the right-hand station in Des Moines and the right-hand station in Kansas City. So by following a pattern, you don't have to, that's not the, there's obviously other patterns you could use, but by following a pattern like that, you end up with half your trains going into the left hand, half in the right hand platforms at each end, and that way you're using your platforms correctly. And now I'm setting all those trains to freight only. Now we're going to go over here to our other line, and we're going to make all these into passenger and mail only. So now we'll have express lines hauling our passengers and mail between our two cities. They'll make really good money. They won't have any freight in their way, so they'll be able to speed right along and get extra ticket prices because they're faster. And we'll have our dedicated freight lines running between our pass-through warehouse, which will give us excellent money, great freight revenue, and great city growth because we're just going to be pumping goods into both those cities like crazy. So I'm trying to see where we're going here, and if we're getting goods in and seeing where we might be a little light on the goods to make sure we get goods into those warehouses. And the last one, and I was also seeing what are we missing, and sugar. Now sugar is interesting. Sugar, you can see it's actually kind of to the north, and there's another one a little further north if I wanted to use it. But I wanted to have kind of to even up my flow into the warehouse. I decided I'd rather come down here and hook up with this southern line from that vegetable line so that I can have 3 items coming from the south, 3 from the north. All that, every bit of that is all about balancing out the distribution of goods coming into the warehouse to keep the flow up. So there I had a choice. You don't always have a choice, but here I had a choice, and I decided to split them up with 3 from each side. So I ran the sugar in a kind of maybe a little bit longer route than it needed, than it really was necessary, but it helps to balance out the flow, and that, frankly, that flow in the warehouse is more important than how long these lines are. If you got the money, the length of the line is not such a big deal, but what really matters is keeping that warehouse moving. And you'll see in a minute when we come back and take a look that well, after we build even more trains, we're going to have tremendous flow through there. It's going to be a lovely, lovely thing. And here's where I finally punch in and realize, hey, I gotta make sure that he's going in on one, and then that tells me, oh wait, I got the same deal with the vegetable line too. Let's make sure that they use warehouse platform 1, because you can see they had both options. They could use either one, again, because we have that extra crossover down there that they could use. All right, so now we've got 4 lines running between Des Moines and 4 freight lines running through our warehouse, 4 trains, I mean, and we're actually going to bump that up. We're going to make it 8. And by the way, I've used this technique. Whatever method you use for balancing them out, when you want to add more, make sure you use this technique. Get the 4 you already got, and then select them right down in order, 1, 2, 3, 4, so that you are continually balancing out your use of the platforms. If you just kept duplicating that same train like the first one over and over, you would eventually, whatever 2 platforms it uses, would get filled up. We got a little bonus here, we might as well grab it. So what we're going to do is set up a station here, and we're going to run milk. And since the bonus is sitting there in front of us, we don't have milk going into our warehouse, so why not pump milk into the city? And we're going to give it its own dedicated line to go in there, because we don't want it in the way of the line we have coming. That's our passenger line that it's kind of bumping up against, but we do not want to share that line because we don't want that freight slowing down our passenger trains. So we're going to have to expand down here in Kansas City. And for whatever reason, I struggled with getting this one to work correctly, and I'm kind of glad I did, because I ended up changing my mind and building 2 platforms so that I could run a train dedicated to each one, because they'll run on kind of different rhythms. So here we go. I expand the platform and think, okay, wouldn't that be a lot easier? So I expand the platform, and then I can run a single line down here. And this time I did a better job. I connected it up and linked it up appropriately. And there was the culprit right there. I told you lately how much I love bridges. You got to deal with that. You can't be more than 2 wide on the bridges. So now I'm going to run it in like so, and now we're looking good. Now we've got milk. We can set up milk lines and run a train to each city. We'll keep milk going in. It'll make profit. It'll help cities grow. Life is good. And we do need an extra supply town. Remember, this is not through our warehouse, so you got to make sure you're going to get supplies in both directions. So we're going to miss the supplies and going to the north, so we're going to add in an extra supply tower up there. Okay, there's our milk line. But look at our money now. It's starting to pick up nicely. And look at we've got our nice little passenger and mail lines running, and they're doing well and making us good money. So we definitely want our accountant. Those accountants are great. They give you great discounts either on buildings or on locomotives. So we've got we've got it going on here with these locomotives. We got them down so they're really cheap. But even at that, to do the John Bull, which is another thing in the 1830s you do want to do at some point, go to the John Bull for everybody. But we're not quite ready for that yet. So I really kind of ignored the industry, but I want to see what's going on here. And we are getting, we want to make sure we got fruit and sugar coming in. since there's a distillery there, I'm gonna bump up the capacity on my sugar line and make sure I'm getting enough sugar coming into the warehouse. And our fruit line looks pretty good because it's already filled up, and of course it'll start getting more pressure when sugar is there and the distillery starts using both of them. But now we've got 8 trains running freight between these two cities. We've got 6 items coming in plus milk. We're giving them 7 goods plus direct feed of cattle into Kansas City. So that's 8 goods that we're giving them. We've got direct feed of wheat into Des Moines so that the beer industry will stay there. And we're looking awfully good. We're starting to make some money and go right on. So we probably ought to wrap this up. I can tell you that I like this strategy. And I like the way it fits together, the timing of it all. So let's just do a quick review. 1, rapid expansion city to city using small train stations, 2 small train stations in each city as appropriate. 2, of course, you can act, and during that, by the way, it's still on phase 1, beer, meat, whenever you can. Now, sometimes you can't, but that's fine. Now, and here we go. Now we are actually, while I'm speaking, now we've got some money. We're going to go through and set our maintenance on every station. We already did it on the warehouse. I kind of did that almost by habit. But now we're going to set up our maintenance. Now, by the way, this maintenance phase really does create, first of all, it costs you a lot of money to do it. And secondly, it will slow down your economy for about a quarter, because what's going to happen is all these trains have not been given maintenance here. We're coming up on 2.5 years into this. So we're 2.5 years. It's taken us 2.5 years to build 5 cities with profitable lines, a full-blown warehouse with tremendous city growth in 2 of our cities. We've got now have maintenance on everything. You know, all the city stations and the warehouse have maintenance. But what's going to happen now is we're going to get a little quarterly drag. So this one's 1.1 million. We'll actually look at the next quarter, and it'll be down around 800 and something. Now, how could that be? Aren't we growing? We are, but all these trains are going to come in for maintenance. It's going to do 2 things. Our maintenance costs are going to go up for a while because we're just kind of getting this big hit on maintenance. And our trains are slowing down because they have to wait on the train that's in the station being serviced. So we will take a little hit on our economy here for about a quarter while all these trains get serviced. But now, going forward, we will have beautiful service trains that are working. Now, just to give you another option, what you could do is hold off on your maintenance, try to get the John Bull upgrade, and then you could hold off some more until and then you could start doing your maintenance later, but you would have brand new trains running everywhere. So that would be another alternative way to look at this. All right, we've covered a ton of ground here. I hope you've enjoyed this and gotten something out of it. I really like the basic approach. And now let me see if I can do a review. 1, rapid expansion, beer, meat. 2, cattle and wheat. Connect cattle to all your meat industries, wheat to all your beer industries as appropriate, and use that profit. Then go to phase 3, which is close out your bonds, open bigger bonds, set up your pass-through warehouse, pick your best combo that you like, that you really want to build, set up your pass-through warehouse, and stimulate the city growth and have your freight thing going, switch your other line over to passenger only and passenger mail only, and now you've got yourself 4 or 5 cities, in our case 5 cities, a nice city growth going on. Now we could expand this obviously and put in some more pass-throughs and grow these other cities, or we could move out and branch out to new places. It really depends on what you're trying to get accomplished. But this whole approach to me gives you a really good, organized, systematic, methodical, yet flexible way of getting your city growth going. And you can see here, we're looking at the warehouse. Look at the beautiful flow through we're getting through that warehouse. And what I'm doing here right now actually is putting museums in Kansas City and Des Moines because they are growing beautifully now. But all right, there's so many other things to say. I need to shut up. So I hope you've enjoyed this one, and I hope you'll be able to apply it to your games. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it'll help you become a better player, and I hope you'll join us for our next Railway Empire video. Thank you.